Lisa, to get us started, give me two truths and a lie, please.
So, two truths. I am passionate about women's financial empowerment, and I am also passionate about people making sure that they stay in the workforce. And I am 33 years old.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. So passionate about women's financial empowerment, people staying in the workforce, and you said 33, Lisa?
33.
All right. Well, this puts everybody in a unique position because it would be horribly distasteful for me to say that you're lying about your age. And it'd be silly for you to say that you're not passionate about women's financial literacy. So I'm going to say the second one's a lie, Lisa.
The second one.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't know that that would be correct. I think that we need to rethink that. So, put you in a bind, didn't it, with your game?
which is part of the idea. So, okay. So you're saying that you are in fact passionate about women's financial literacy. You are in fact keeping people in the workforce. So you're saying you're not 33 years old, Lisa?
I'm not. I'm
Uh,
63 years old and I just had my first grandchild, actually.
well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That is excellent. And I
Thank you.
hear that grandchildren are wonderful. I've got three kids of my own, and they're great. But I can see where being a grandparent would be even better.
Yes, no, grandchildren are great. And of course my grandchild is super great. So
Of
there you
course.
go.
Of course. All right. Well, you got me. Well played. What is top of mind for you right now, Lisa?
So I would say top of mind for me is basically my business. And as I said, I am passionate about women's financial literacy. I think that women needing to stay in the workforce and women actually making sure that they take control of their finances and make sure that they understand their finances is very, very important. And then I would say the other thing that's probably top of mind is prenups, prenups, prenups. People need to do more prenups.
All right. Well, that is a lot of stuff for us to get into today. If you don't mind, I've got kind of a global question. Is divorce good or bad?
Divorce, I think, is good.
Tell me more about
And
that.
that's not a lie. So I think divorce, I think if someone doesn't want to be in the marriage, you need to be divorced. I think that divorce gives people a second chance, sometimes a third chance, or even a fourth. But I think that there's no reason for two people to be unhappy in a marriage, or forced to stay in a marriage for any reason. I think people need to leave when it's time for them to leave. And I think that even if you're not the one asking for the divorce, I think the fact that your spouse wants a divorce and doesn't feel that the marriage is satisfying anymore is reason enough for everyone to want to get to that next chapter when everybody can be happy and be on the same page as to what they really want.
No, fair enough. Thank you. All right. So it's essential that men and women certainly are financially literate, that they understand their finances. So I'm interested in unpacking that a little bit. And then the second was it's important that people stay in the workforce. So I'm 46 and
Is
certainly
that a lie?
nope, that is God's honest truth right there. And for my entire life, adult life, it's been common for women to be in the workforce. And I'm an absolute feminist. I think that women can do everything that a man can do. There have been more conversations these days, at least I perceive there to be more, almost going the opposite way, that it's fine for women to, and men for that matter, to be happy being in the home. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I think that if both people decide that they want to have a stay-at-home parent, whether it be frankly the woman or the man um, that that's what they should do. That's their lives, right? But I think that there needs to be essentially an outline of what's going to happen in the event of a divorce. And I go back to what I said earlier, which is that along with financial literacy, I'm a big believer in prenups and maybe postnups as well, because I think that if you were leaving the workforce for a period of time, and I'm not talking about just months for maternity leave or because there's a specific issue with a child or whatever. I'm talking about leaving the workforce for a period of time that would be in the years. I think you are giving up a lot. You're giving up that trajectory of being able to move and elevate yourself in terms of a career and in terms of the compensation that you will be missing out on. I don't think that 20 years from the time that you leave the workforce that you're going to be able to really make up that time in terms of compensation. I think that moving up that ladder is important and making the contacts and networking and being out there and essentially being part of the workforce. I don't think you can make that up. And so I really do feel strongly that people should remain in the workforce. If you want to spend more time with your family, so then stay in the workforce at least part-time, or figure out some sort of a hybrid situation where you're more, on a remote type of schedule. There's different ways to stay in the workforce, but I think that being out of the workforce completely is a bad idea, frankly. I think that it just is not suited. And I think that at the end of the day, I've seen too many people, both spouses, even when they both agreed that somebody should remain out of the workforce, that it has built resentment. The cash flow is not as strong as it could be, and I think that the person who's been out of the workforce suffers in a very big way. The spousal support will not make up for the amount of time that you have left the workforce and the amount of compensation that you're going to give up. And I've seen, more often than not, it's women, but sometimes it's men as well. And when they try to go back into the workforce after a considerable amount of time that they've been out of the workforce, their compensation is just very, very low. And it didn't have to be that way. And they're looking at their lifestyle that they created, and they're looking at their other spouse who is making significant compensation, and they don't understand how this could have happened. And so, yeah, I do agree with you that more and more people are starting to look back at that traditional idea. I'm not sure how we got back to this again, but we did. And this idea of having a stay-at-home parent. And maybe that's great, and maybe that's great for your family, but I think that there needs to be essentially a contract of what's going to happen if and when there's a divorce and how that compensation is going to be made up.
We all want a fairy tale ending, but the statistics suggests that very few of us do. So, being that we live in the real world with real world consequences that you've just laid out, we need to plan. And what's the right term? We just need to be grown up enough to have these conversations on the front end. Need to have
Yeah.
courage enough and advocate for ourselves enough to be able to have these kind of conversations.
I'm board chair of Savvy Ladies, and one of the podcasts that we created was called The Power of the Ask. Okay. And I think it's about the power of the ask, really asking for what you're going to need. And so if the two parties, spouses, partners, et cetera, are sitting down and having a conversation about how you want to raise your children, or maybe there's no children and you still want to have a stay-at-home spouse because it's convenient or it's fun, or money is really of no issue at the moment, and it would be nice to be able to travel together. I mean, we see that, right? Then there needs to just be a plan. But you need to ask, and you need to think ahead, and you need to be strong about it, and you need to learn to advocate for yourself.
Money is at no issue at the moment. The perfect time to have this kind of conversation because when it becomes an issue, it's a little different.
Yeah, it's too late at that time. That's when everybody is struggling and everybody is clamoring to get what they consider to be their fair share, right? And that term fair, as I explained to somebody this morning, is a very relative term.
Yeah, gloves are off, Lisa. And
Exactly.
then we have to hire you to destroy our former spouse.
We try not to destroy, but we do try to get as much as we can.
we hire you to advocate for us
Yes.
against our former spouse. So it's all fun and games. Okay, so what do people need? The power of the ask, understanding what you just said. Is it the right language? Is it an understanding of what a prenup actually is? Like what?
So I think it's first of all courage to have the discussion. It is the ability to discuss finances. Finances can't be a dirty word. You have to actually be able to discuss money as if you discuss, whether or not you're going to have coffee in the morning, right? That's same thing, right? There's no difference. Coffee or money, it should be common language. And I think that it's also about understanding what the finances are, what's the burn rate that we're actually living on, what's the compensation that we would be living on if there was only one salary, what's going to be my ask later if I'm going to be the stay-at-home parent. And how are you going to make that happen if I'm going to be the stay-at-home parent? And is that something that you really want to do? Because that puts a lot of responsibility on the other person. And how are we going to live? Are we going to be budgeting? Do you feel like you're going to have more control than I do because you're earning? These are all really important questions. I personally wouldn't want somebody to have more control over me because they're earning. If we've decided that we're both staying home, one of us is staying home, I would really find that annoying and irritating. So I think that there's a lot that goes into this, being very honest and authentic about really who you are and what you are willing to tolerate and what you really want out of life. Maybe money isn't really your issue. Maybe you really don't care about it. Maybe you feel that it's not important. And maybe that's so. And so, putting your family first may be much more important to you, and that's great. But make sure that that's really how you think you're going to feel 20 or 25 or even 30 years from now, because it could get really tough.
Yeah. Whew. Got to have the ability to have an honest conversation, which means that you have an understanding of money and your cash flow, your expenses, your IRAs, your 401ks, your stock, whatever, all of it. You have to at least have some kind of a working knowledge to be able to understand if this does go sideways and it doesn't go just the way we want it to, where will I be? And what will we do moving forward? Will we have the capacity to do that? Um, these all seem very, 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 very straightforward conversations and very reasonable. But how many people are actually having these?
Well, not enough would be the answer, right? Not enough people. And certainly, even if they're having the conversation, they're not entering into binding agreements about this. And so we often hear people come to us who say, but he or she told me we're in it together, or don't worry, it's going to be fine. I'll always take care of you, or this is for us, or all of those things that we hear. That's all very nice, lovely language, but unfortunately, it's not actually language that will stand up in court when, as we talked about, everybody is clamoring for that same pot, essentially. And so
Yeah.
you have to be able to put your money where your mouth is and essentially contract to do this. And if you can do that, then this could all work, and it could work for the long term, and it builds security and transparency, and it also could be great for your family. I mean, this could be terrific for your family if someone is making significant monies and we don't need two incomes and we want to have a stay-at-home parent. And it makes it easier, frankly, for the person who is working and putting in the hours. This could all really work. But again, a plan, a contract, a binding agreement, a prenup or a postnup.
It strikes me that both parties in a perfect world would be interested in putting putting some illegal contract behind the flowery words, but I doubt that that happens Is it oftentimes then it would be the person who's going to be stepping out of the workforce and staying at home should be driving this? Is it ever the parents of these newlyweds or soon to be?
So I think that to some degree, so you're almost talking about two different things. So I think that to a large degree, parents often drive a prenup. Okay, if they have, um, I would say, adult children who are going to inherit perhaps a great deal of money, then they may be the driving force because they want to make sure that the legacy that they created is protected. And that's certainly understandable. And they also want to make sure that not only does it not go to the other spouse in the event of a divorce, that it doesn't go to the other spouse in the event of a death. Because it could not only go to the other spouse in the event of a death, but then to that person's new spouse and new family, et cetera. And so I think that many times parents of adult children are actually proponents of prenuptial agreements. And certainly if they're going to be leaving large inheritances, I think they have a stake in it. And the answer is if their adult children don't want to do that, then they can actually think about whether or not they are willing to give up that stake. And so that's one part. I think that additionally, in the event of a transition, such as someone is going to stay at home and take care of children, that may be a good time to have a postnuptial agreement if there's been no prenuptial agreement that addresses this. And having a postnuptial agreement can address this particular issue and can compensate in terms of spousal support or a greater share of the equitable distribution of assets or some other compensation that that maybe I haven't thought of at the moment.
That makes a lot of sense. And it certainly makes sense as part of a greater estate plan and contingency planning because people do get sick and we certainly do die. It's a very, very sad thing, but a very real thing. And then what happens? Where do the assets go? Where do the kids go? All those kinds of things. I hate to refer to this as a bit of a Trojan horse, but could it be I'm also aware that people have a hard time having difficult conversations. They say, hey, we need to get an estate plan done. We need to get guardianship done. We need to do this kind of stuff. And by the way, I'd also be comfortable if we could have a conversation about what happens if this doesn't work out between you and I.
Exactly. And again, yes, these are difficult conversations. There's no question about this, okay? But we're adults, right? And we're supposed to be able to have these difficult conversations with the people that we love and who love us. And we should be having these difficult conversations now as opposed to when it's too late to have that difficult conversation. And so, maybe people need to practice it. Maybe they need to think about it ahead of time. Maybe they need to speak to a therapist. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to have this conversation, but they certainly need to have the conversation.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible for people to do this on their own?
To have the conversation?
Well, to take it
Sure.
all from soup to nuts.
No, I don't actually. I think that people need the guidance of attorneys when they're entering into prenuptial or postnuptial agreements. I think that there is no soup to nuts when you're doing that. I think it's really important that you have an attorney who is knowledgeable about drafting these types of agreements. So no, I don't think it's a soup to nuts thing, but I think it's certainly a conversation that you and your potential spouse or you and your spouse should be having.
Yeah. It makes all the sense in the world. But there's that behavior gap between what I intellectually know and then what I actually do. So closing that gap, which is why we're having this conversation, so we can give people some practical tools in order to be engaged in these kinds of things.
Yep.
So certainly an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I'd rather do this on the front end and do a prenup. The postnup, so after we're married, I can still go in. Is that as valid as a prenup?
So in New York, it's valid. I mean, provided you've done it correctly. In other states, it may not be valid. They may not recognize postnuptial agreements. So, as to your audience, they should check their state rules and see if postnuptial agreements are actually upheld or not, because there are some states that don't uphold postnuptial agreements. And so in that particular case, that becomes a really big problem. But for states like New York that do uphold postnuptial agreements, the state regularly recognizes postnuptial agreements because they want people to enter into these contracts and agree upon terms.
You would think that would be better for everybody so that the system doesn't get clogged up. Because I imagine once you do engage in a legal battle of some kind, or once you start going to court over divorce and trying to break up assets that way, I imagine it's intensive. I imagine there's a lot of resources,
It's expensive, it's tedious, and people are not at their best. But sometimes there's just no choice.
right? Sometimes there is just no choice. So if you're somebody who's feeling like, do I know when it's time to divorce? How do I figure that out?
So it's a funny question. So I've been married 27 years. I'll share that. It's my second marriage. And I once said to a friend of mine who was a therapist that I think everyone should get divorced if they aren't waking up to the person that when they wake up next to the person, that they're not elated every day, right? And I feel like when I wake up to the person that I'm next to, I am thrilled every day, right? That we are together. And there's not a day that I'm not thrilled. And she said, well, Lisa, that's a very high standard. So why don't we just say like 80% of the time you should wake up and feel like, great joy that the person next to you is next to you. And maybe we don't hold them out to the 100%. So fine, okay, I'll take her advice and we'll go for 80%. Although I think 80% is low and I really don't understand it, but okay. I mean, I think that when you're not happy with that person anymore, when that person is not bringing you pleasure, when you feel that it's just not working, or that you're not on the same page, or that you're not agreeing, or that you don't have common interests, or that you just can't stand it anymore, or that you really don't like seeing that person in your home, then I think that it's time.
There it is. It's time. Elation.
Yeah, elation, right? Because you only have one time around, from my
True.
point of view, right?
We got one crack at this deal. So we better be happy. We better be elated. For goodness sakes, at least 80% of the time. I like it.
At least 8%.
Well, we are ready for that difference making tip, Lisa. What do you have for us?
So I would say that the difference making tip is really being educated about your certainly about your finances, but also about your life generally, right? I mean, you should know what's happening around you. Be aware, be cognizant, make sure that you're checked in with your spouse or your partner in every way, not just financial, but in every way, because I think that people often take others for granted and they should not do that.
Well, I think that is great stuff. That definitely gets a come on. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you? How can they engage with you?
So they can go to lisazeiderman.com, just my name, and it's got lots of blogs and articles that I write, as well as other podcasts, etc. So that's certainly a good way to learn about me. Listening to my podcast is also a good way, listening to this podcast. And they can also reach me at my email at lz@mzw-law.com, or they can call 914-455-1000.
Excellent. Well, if you enjoyed as much as I did, show Lisa your appreciation. Share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas, for any married person in your life for that matter. Go to lisazeiderman.com. It's LISAZEIDERMAN.com. Check out the podcast, check out previous podcast episodes that she's been on. And I know just for me personally, having the right language, having the right words to express myself and get my feelings and my point across is a really valuable and important thing. So I know that Lisa's got a great way of talking about these things, and she spends a lot of time empowering and helping people to do the same. And to her point, being educated about our finances and our life is such an important thing. So we need to take priority on that or put priority on that as well. Thanks again, Lisa.
Thank you so much, George.
Finally, friendly reminder. It's what we've been talking about right now. There's never going to be anybody more interested in your financial life than you are. So act accordingly.